And we're live streaming.
Thanks, Jennifer. I just got a text from Councilmember Bowden. He's having some technical issues and he'll be on in a moment. So it is, I've got 5 o'clock on my end. Y'all have 5 o'clock on your end? I might be in a time warp here.
Or
Yes,
less.
sir.
All right, we're gonna get started. I would like to call the September 15th, 2022 Human Affairs and Racial Conciliation Committee meeting to order. The time is now 5:01 on my end. Hopefully everyone is doing well. We'll start with a invocation, which will just be a moment of silence. Thank you all. And if you are not speaking, if you could just make sure that your phone or computer is on mute. Next up is our approval of tonight's agenda. Can I hear a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Thank you. That motion was properly seconded. Any discussion on tonight's agenda?
And I'm sorry, who was the second?
That was
Mr. Co-Chair?
that was Carol Jackson.
And who made the motion?
I did.
Okay, thank you.
Jason, I do have one clarification question. So we have an open discussion item. Does that mean that we can introduce topics that aren't on the agenda, or is that a discussion for only agenda items?
That's a good question. I'm not sure if we articulated that in the rules document that we shared. If we didn't, I would say it could be both. We can add to the next month's agenda. We can use that as an opportunity to add an item, or we can talk about pretty much anything that's on tonight's agenda. Let's keep it focused on that. So topic focused for tonight's agenda, or suggesting an item for the next month's agenda. All in favor of approving this evening's agenda, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passed for approval of tonight's agenda. Next up is our public comment period, and I do believe we have one individual on. Sir, if you're still with us, if you could just tell us your name and where you live, and you can feel free to comment as you wish.
And
Okay, my name
Mr.
is
Co-Chair,
Matt.
was there a time limit for citizens participation?
We've got one. I will give you a whole 2 minutes if you like.
Okay, I submitted, I guess, for lack of a better word, application of interest to serve on the committee. And as my statement said, I wasn't clear if that would suffice or if I also needed to speak. But I just feel that, well, first of all, my name is Matt Woolsey. I live on James Island, pretty much in the thick of the middle of James Island. And I've been in Charleston 7 years. I am a native South Carolinian. I'm 64, and I feel that I bring a lot of just a lifetime of experience of having grown up in South Carolina, born and raised in the Midlands. Excuse me. But I was in the 5th grade, the first year that the partial integration occurred in public schools. And I went to school throughout the entire integration process. And then my adult years have taught me a lot as far as just interacting with people. I'm a very empathetic person. I think there's sometimes a fine line to be drawn between what is racist and what is not. And I think that communication is key as to understanding, helping each other understand, and just being empathetic with each other. And I understand about gentrification. I'm interested in cities. I have been since the age of 19. I'm interested in demographics, sociological issues, and I just feel I would bring a lot to the table if I were appointed to serve on the committee. And that would about wrap it up for me. And I just hope that you're able to consider my appointment, and that I will be able to serve on the committee. Thank you very much. And at this point, I guess I should just leave the meeting, or
You could continue. I'll leave that up to Jennifer, but I believe it's being broadcast on YouTube. So Jennifer, I'm not sure what our rule is with that.
Yes, sir. You can stay on, or you don't have to if you need to leave, but we also are live streaming it on YouTube.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to speak, and I hope to speak with y'all again soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Mr. Co-Chair, we only received one comment online, and that actually was from Mr. Woolsey. I was going to read it at the meeting, but since he already spoke, I can send that to all of you by email.
Thank you, Jennifer. At this point, I'd like to move on to the approval of our minutes for the August 18th meeting, which we had. May I hear a motion to approve the minutes for our August 18th, 2022 meeting?
I move that we approve the minutes.
Second.
Awesome.
Jason, this is Carol Fry.
Yes.
I have a correction, or I guess it would be an addition to the minutes.
Sure.
In the last meeting, I volunteered to be on the recommendations work group,
Yes.
and that was missed in the minutes.
We can add that in there. You want to approve as amended.
Okay, yeah, it was under 7, open discussion, and I guess you'd call it paragraph 2 on page 5 of the minutes. And I volunteered to be on that committee, so I just wanted to make sure that it showed in the minutes.
Thank you, Carol, for that correction and amendment. So can I hear a motion to approve the minutes of our August 18th, 2022 as amended to indicate Carol's amendment, whatever it is, Carol's amendment to make sure that the record reflects that he was indicating he wanted to volunteer for that committee.
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? All right, that motion passes as well. Moving on, we are now up to our park manager update, and Adrian, feel free to take it from here.
Thank you, Jason. So good evening, everyone. Just a couple of updates, highlighted updates. I'm working on scheduling more meetings and rescheduling those meetings that I missed because I was under the weather. And thank you to those who knew I was under the weather and reached out. I'm on the mend, feeling great now. I'm also working with communications when it comes to our website. So we have some back-facing internet web going on, and we just want to make sure we're front-facing and user-friendly so that we have visibility. And I'm working with the communications team here. As far as the city of Charleston, I met with the Equity Core team, and we are creating some mobility when it comes to recruitment for other members of the different departments with the city. And I'm also continuing my research for workshops. I know that we are looking for Saturday workshops. That may need to change, but I'm pulling over one more stone before I state that we may not be able to do Saturday workshops. It's just not one of the options that are given at the time when I look at different institutions and those who are able to come out and actually do the trainings with us. And lastly, I know it was noted last meeting that we would need nameplates or some way to identify our colleagues. So I'm working on the nameplates and also binders just to keep everyone organized. And that's what I have, Jason and team.
Thank you. Any discussion on the workshop piece? Because I do believe that it's something we've wanted to get scheduled. To Adrian's point, a Saturday might be tough. I would like to, have a discussion real quickly about alternatives. During the day, we're a diverse group. Some of us, are retired or not retired or working. So let me just throw out some scenarios. Could we do something, later in the day, like 3-ish till 6 or 3 to 5? Or would you prefer something around 5 o'clock after the work hour? Just some thoughts to throw out.
Also, to add to the conversation, are we doing in person or are we trying to do virtual?
I think I think in person is a must.
That's my thoughts.
Any thoughts, y'all?
This is Bob. I think I'm off mute now. I mean, Saturday I was for because it makes it a lot easier to schedule. But if it's kind of like today, that Thursday afternoon tends to be pretty good. I could even do, 3 o'clock on into the evening.
Okay. Thank you, Bob. Thank you. Anyone else? And thanks, Jerry. Hey, Jerry, for joining us.
Yeah, I apologize. My other meeting I was chairing ran over.
Oh, all right. 3 o'clock time frame, just so we can give Adrian some kind of alternatives to work in. Would 3 o'clock be okay? Stephen?
I mean, if I had to guess at this point, it might just be easiest to kind of circulate some dates like that are, several weeks down the line, and that might just give everybody a better opportunity to block that particular time off. I personally don't have any days that are just regularly available, so it might be kind of hard to plan on that basis.
Can I just ask?
Yeah, this is Bob again. If we had some options as you just suggested, and it might be that we might have to go to 2 smaller sessions of half of the group, depending on the time and availability. But having some options would certainly help planning.
Yeah, Bob.
Carol was up next, and then Jerry.
Thanks, Jason. I was just wanting to clarify with Adrian. So you were talking about institutions, organizations who are known for doing these workshops. I know that, and maybe this was a product of, the tragedies of 2020, but it seemed like there were a lot of consultants that were willing to take on programs like this. So do you have a list of people that would be able to be more flexible as, individuals or some sort of consulting group?
Yeah, I can reach out to some of the consultants. I've been looking more so at the institution who basically dispatched their people out. And also, if you have any contacts with consulting groups, I think Jerry may have a few as well. But
okay, yeah, I'll be happy to go back through my folders. And
yes, just send them my way. And also to Stephen, I can send out a doodle poll to give certain dates. But what I was confirming first was that we had the funding, and 2, that we had like some kind of time frame or something to just go from, because sending out a poll for like, it would be easier if I send it from 3 to this time or this, because days change and I have to see what the consultants are available to do as well. So that would narrow it down, but I can send out a poll.
Thank you, Adrian. Any other questions or concerns regarding that? Awesome. All right, we're just transitioning on to the rules and operations discussion. Thank you, Adrian.
Mr. Co-Chair, I think Commissioner Jackson had her hand up.
Sorry, I just had one question from Adrian's report when she mentioned core equity group members. Maybe you could just remind all of us what that body is so that we can appreciate them.
Sure. So before I came in this seat, Amber Johnson And there are others. Chloe was one of them, Robin, Monique from HR. They led what's called the Equity Core Group for the city of Charleston. And that group, there are individuals who have a passion for DEI work, and they represent each department or division here with the city. So what we do is we meet monthly, and there's also open discussion about, someone has a specific topic that is, they're dealing with in their department, because what we're trying to combat here is the silos. So we know that the city of Charleston has a culture, and then those individual departments have culturals as well. So they're able to give voice to that. And kudos to Chloe, Monique, and Robin, who after Amber's departure, they kept the group going. So now that I sit in this seat, I'm doing another recruitment, because some way along the lines, either some people got too stretched and they just can't attend the meetings. So we're doing it as a primary and an alternate. So that way someone is there. But I think it's very important that we also get those individuals who have a passion for DEI and a passion for being able to have those hard conversations, because we know the importance of safe spaces.
Is it appropriate for us to just have a list of those people, maybe after you've updated the people who will participate? I mean, I would just love to encourage whoever I run into over time.
Yeah, and the group has also voiced to me that maybe, and I'm going to look into that as well. I'll send out an email about having some of the commission members come to some of our meetings, so that you could actually see what we're doing and see how we're trying to move the work. So I'll exchange those emails as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Carol. Thanks, Adrienne. Jennifer, I just got a text or email from Miss Milligan. She said she couldn't get on with the Zoom link. Is there a way to sign on via phone? I told her we would send her a link.
And I'm sorry, Mr. Co-Chair, who is that again?
Miss Sharon Milligan?
I think she is on.
Okay.
If you can press *6 to unmute yourself. I received.
Yes, I was able to get in. Thanks for resending the telephone number. I apologize. My Zoom link didn't work, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Oh, you're good. Thank you. Okay, moving on. We're going to transition to our rules and operations discussion. You all had received a copy of that that sent out yesterday. The intent, based on last meeting, was to draft something, get that something sent out to you, so we can establish some rules and policies for this commission. We can have a discussion, but I'd like to start with a motion to approve those draft rules, and then we can go into discussions. So can I hear a motion to approve the draft rules that have been presented to us?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second. Also.
All right. So the motion was properly seconded. Is there any discussion on this item? Bonnie?
Mr. Co-Chair.
I'm sorry, Jerry. Bonnie had her hand up, and then I'm going to come to you.
Okay.
I don't know about the rest of you. I think probably if you've been on these kinds of commissions before, you understand some of the language, but I had to look some things up. The language doesn't seem particularly accessible to me. And so I don't know how detailed I should be right now, but I would like to see where the rules say without leave of an acclamation be made a bit more accessible and specific.
And Bonnie, is there a specific section that you're referencing?
So in section G 2-41, it says without leave of, and I'm now going from my notes and not actually looking at the document. So let me pull that up. So my understanding is that without leave of means without the commission's permission. And so in that section G 2-41, I figured that out, and then it says except to explain. And so even when I translated it into English, I still wasn't clear exactly what that meant.
My guess is Jerry was probably going to weigh in on a few of those things. So Jerry's one that took the lead in on this, and Adrian helped draft this. So Jerry, can you weigh in on that?
Sure. First of all, just as a general note, the effort was made to take the ordinance, so the section on purpose and the section on duties come directly from the ordinance. Membership information comes directly from the ordinance. The area under Roman numeral 3, B, which it says resignation, where the letters TBD, that's to be developed, is intended there. And throughout the document where you see TDB, that's the case. And I also, many of these items were taken from, just lifted from the city council's rules and procedures, and some of the archaic, some of the language is simply lifted and inserted, and we certainly can clarify if necessary. And for example, there is a section, and I should know it, but I don't, that actually makes reference to a fine being levied for doing something. That language should not be, we should remove that language from the document. So the effort here was to get pretty much a set of information in one place, utilizing the city council rules, the ordinance that created us, and I drew also from the Citizen Police Advisory Committee document, which guidelines which had been established and run by the City Corporation Council. So the effort was to make sure we're using documents that were pretty much already approved. We can improve the language for clarity that was my only observation at this point, Jason.
All right, thank you, co-chair. So I guess I'm happy to have more conversation, but Bonnie, if there's a specific section that you want to remove, you can make a motion and we can vote on that. Or if there's an amendment or change of language, we're happy to do that too. So Stephen?
I certainly understand, Bonnie, what you're saying, and it makes really good sense to make this accessible to the public. Pretty clearly, the reason that some of these were used just because it's what we typically use in council, I think, and they're not the best word choice if we were writing them today, but they weren't. These are Robert's rules basically. So, like, I think a definition section might help. That might be the easiest idea, as opposed to rewriting some things. Although if the idea is to make these more accessible to the public, maybe it's worth rewriting some things. But we do know that these work well for governing meetings, and just so for ease, for Adrian's convenience, basically, and all the things that she's going to have to focus on going forward. As opposed to rewriting these, I think just adding a definition section would be probably the most efficient use of her time.
Thank you, Stephen. Anyone else?
And Mr. Co-Chair, Commissioner Seekings had his hand up earlier. I didn't know if he still needed to speak.
If that's okay, I would like to be recognized, Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Mike.
First, thank you. I'm sorry I have my camera off, but I'm in a spot that you don't want to see where I am, so I apologize. First and foremost, to those who worked on these rules, it's really an amazing and professional job. It's really great to see something thoughtful come across our desk, so thank you for that. I have two observations, and probably they come from the angle of a sitting member on this commission and as a city council member, Mr. Chairs. One is the media contact. I mean, we get contacted by the media a lot, and this commission is going to garner a lot of attention from the media. I think an outright ban on talking to media without commission approval is probably something that's maybe even antithetical to what we do on this commission, which is to, speak our minds. So I would like to think about that. And so I think that's something that we just need to think about in terms of a rule of the commission.
Thank you, Mike, for that.
So Jason, just in response to Mike, the notion was the intent of the language, and we can change it, was not to prohibit members of the commission from speaking to the media. It's just they're not speaking on behalf of the commission. In other words, they're not articulating a position on the part of the commission. That's the intent.
And I get that, and I appreciate that. Thank you. I just think, sometimes that line gets a little bit blurred, right? When you're sitting on as a member of the commission. So I just want to think about that language and how that's going to sort of play out.
So
This is Bob raising my hand.
Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, just to reiterate that, I mean, that language was there just to remind the members that if somebody asks you a question, you can't speak on behalf of the organization. Obviously, you can always speak on your own recognizance, but it doesn't give us the authority to speak for the organization. Likewise, there's language in there that we can't incur debts or engage the city. We're only an advisory body, so we can't, enter contracts or anything else. And there's language in there that kind of addresses that. I will speak to one thing that, because I was the guy that put in something about the fines, which is lifted straight out of the city council rules, because we're supposed to be polite to each other. And in city council, there are fines incurred if you're not, which are deducted from your salary. And since we don't have a salary, I put that in so that it would have to be from our salary, so there wouldn't be one there. But they can go away. That's fine too.
Thanks, Bob. So I've heard so far three, I wouldn't say concerns, but potential changes. One is maybe a definition section that has some definitions for some of the key words. Number two, potentially removing, which I would support, section 4FB, which is the fine for profanity and disrespect. And then potentially Mike's rewrite of that section regarding the media and just being more clear about what we're specifying on that. Those are the only three I've heard from you all. Stephen?
And Mr. Co-Chair, Commissioner Jackson and Commissioner Cleveland had their hands up as well.
Okay, I'm sorry. You guys are just raising your hands, not going to the, that's all right. I will go with Bonnie and then Carol and then Stephen. Bonnie, I think you're on mute.
Unmute, sorry. I would like to understand what in section 2-69J, what does by petition or memorial mean? And then if somebody could actually put it in context and tell me what that section means, I had difficulty with it.
I'm looking for it myself. You said 2-69A.
Section that deals with citizen participation.
Okay.
Roman numeral 7.
Okay.
And that would be J, I think.
I got you. Oh, so Bonnie, it's all communications to the commission shall be by petition or memorial. That's a great question. Carol or Mike or some of our elder statesmen here or Stephen?
Just in general usage, memorial would just be something put in writing. And then petition would be, commonly understood, just a group of people making a petition or even one person making a petition. So again, certainly old-fashioned language. That's probably not the easiest way that we would write it if we wrote it today. But yeah, point well taken. Again, maybe a definition section helps with that. Maybe it's just easier to rewrite it. I think Adrian, we could certainly trust your judgment about that.
Carol, then Mike.
Thank you. And yeah, I was just reacting to both Bonnie and Stephen's, good comments. I think we can, I think we can trust Adrian to find a hybrid approach to pick out the words that are either, very specific and topical to the commission's work to be in a definition list. But then, the example that Bonnie gave to us right away was this desirous of speaking. I mean, I think that's the kind of paragraph that just, regular English could be a very easy help to. And I mean, I'd be happy to, if Bonnie doesn't have the time, I'd be happy to help Adrian just sort of look for those things that are, you shouldn't have to read a paragraph twice, to understand what the rule is. So I think it needs to be plain speaking, and those desirous of speaking wouldn't be in a definitions list of my experience. So I think a hybrid, we can do this. Everybody's made really good content. We need to, focus on these types of things.
Thank you, Carol. Mike?
So this one is actually, when you've been around for a while, pretty easy when you know how we operate at City Council and how we pull this from our rules. Traditionally at committee, in fact, in all our committees, except for some of the newly created ones, we don't have public comment. So if someone wants to bring something up before that committee for consideration, you do it by petition, which is a written request, or memorial, which is a written observation, and then it gets debated. We have public comment here. So I think when we get into the definitions section and when we sort of rethink this paragraph may actually be superfluous because we do have public comment. But if you want the commission to take up a matter, it has to be done in writing to the commission in advance so we can put it on an agenda. That's effectively what this language is. And petition is request, memorial is observation. We could probably dust that language off a little bit and shine it up.
Thank you, Mike. Any other discussion on this? Bob, are you going to say something, or are you on mute? Or so I think just go ahead, Bob. One last comment.
I'm sorry, I thought I muted, but no, that's everything. Good comments.
All right. So Adrian, if you want to work with Carol on kind of cleaning this up, and Jerry, so it looks to me like we're going to bring this back again for a final version to vote on for the next meeting. Is there anything else on this particular item?
And Mr. Co-Chair, did Commissioner Ballard and Commissioner Jackson want to withdraw the motion?
Yes. So
Yes.
I made a motion. All right. So Carol's going to withdraw the motion, and Stephen has also indicated he's good with that. Thank you. Next up is our ordinance amendment. This was just a FYI for folks. I do have it in front of us. So if you recall back to our first meeting, this is our fourth meeting, I believe. So our first meeting, we discussed an ordinance that was going to come to council, which I believe is coming at the second September 27th or 28th. It's our last meeting in September. The language here that was shared with you, basically two changes that we made. And I can read that. So basically, instead of we're taking out submit these recommendations, we are basically going to provide a status report to council as to the progress on this review by December of 2022. So this is going to have to come to council for a change to the original ordinance that was passed. That's the one change. And then the other change, and this speaks to the callers who called in. Right now, we do have a vacancy on this commission. So in the event any seat remains open for more than 3 meetings attributable to a council member appointment, the mayor may offer a nomination for council consideration. So that will likely go into effect. We do have a vacancy, and based on the fact that this is our 4th meeting. Once we pass this amended ordinance, we should be able to fill that vacancy based on the mayor's appointment. So those are the 2 changes that we wanted to share with you all. I'm happy to have a discussion, but it was just an FYI. This is an ordinance that was passed by City Council. Any thoughts? Any confusion about the changes that we're asking council to approve? Awesome. Well, thank you for that. Moving on, we are going to turn it over to Chloe. And you've got access to the screen, Chloe?
Yes.
All right, cool.
And
Over.
I think was the next item the review of park history discussion?
Oh, yes, thank you, Jennifer, yes. And that was put on by Carol. So Carol, if you're on, just wanted to make sure that we acknowledge that item was added by Carol. So what I wanted to do is just quickly take us through the history of how we got here. And Carol, feel free to chime in, if what I'm saying doesn't ring true, or if you've got additional questions. But I think part of Carol's request was a brief history. And Jerry, you were there with me, and Carol, of course, Jackson, you were there. So please correct the record if I mistake this. But in June of 2020, the mayor had decided to put a special commission together called the Equity, Inclusion, and Racial Conciliation Commission, and asked myself and Councilman Gregory to chair that special commission. That was in June of 2020. Our first commission meeting was, I believe, in September, October timeframe. We met for several months. The original timeline was 90 days to come up with recommendations. We quickly realized that we needed additional time. So again, we went back to council for kind of an extension on that. Council granted that. It was about a year that we made the final recommendations and presented those recommendations at the August 2021 meeting in, I believe it was Daniel Island or James Island. I can't recall. It's all
Daniel Island, August 17th.
The infamous Dan.
Thank you, Jerry, for that. And feel free to chime in. So we had it was on the agenda for approval at the August meeting. At that same meeting, we were also discussing COVID regulations. It was a very hot, heated, contested meeting, and kind of things went off the rails. Not regarding the ordinance per se, but just some of the COVID regulations. A lot of speakers that were heated and very fervent about their position. At that point, we took a vote to approve the receiving the report. We did not necessarily, and I guess, Carol Jackson and Mike, feel free to chime in from a procedural standpoint. We didn't necessarily have to take a vote to receive the report. Many commissions provide their recommendations to council, and we don't take a vote. It's just for information only. So we could have chosen to do that. I believe Councilman Gregory opted to have a voice or vote count. That vote failed by one vote, I believe, to receive the report. And basically that report was not received by council, even though technically speaking, the mayor did receive the report and staff did receive the report. That's took us to August. So Carol and Mike and Jerry and Alvin and anyone else that's on, is that correct? Did I have the dates correct? And feel free to add in.
I mean, I think the only thing you didn't add was at that same raucous meeting, there was the first reading of the establishment of a permanent commission, and we did have a positive vote for that establishment. It was a different language than what is currently established, the ordinance that actually has now established the existing HARC.
Okay.
But we had a first reading of an establishment ordinance that was approved.
Okay.
But then it was delayed until
January.
January.
So thank you for that addition. So Carol, I mean, not Carol Jackson, Carol, you added this to the agenda. I just want to make sure we're covering everything that you had needed or wanted. And if there's additional, let us know.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Jason, very much. I appreciate it. What, and I don't want to take up, any more time, for the full commission here, but what I was looking at was trying to understand, and without having to go back, I don't know if all the meetings of the special commission are online. And as an example, I could go back and look at every one of them. I guess that's one option, but what I was looking at was I mentioned that I looked at the last meeting of the commission before presenting to the council.
Gotcha.
And Councilman Appel brought up the fact that, you know, there's some things here that may create some issues. And, you know, what I was looking at was, I know early in a process, there's something, you know, that I know in the old days we used to call brainstorming. And there was a rule that says there's no critique of brainstorming ideas, because the idea is to get every idea out on the table and not to critique them or, you know, throw water on them or anything. And maybe, you know, that's what happened. But I guess what I was really looking for was, you know, an analysis of, okay, leading up to that last meeting before presenting to council, was there discussion about these issues and whether or not they were controversial and why they might be controversial? So that's what I'm really looking at. And again, I don't need to waste everyone's time here. Maybe I can schedule an appointment with you, you know, and you can give me some benefit. If I have to, I'll go back and look at all of those meetings, and but I have a feeling that's a lot of hours of meetings that I would have to go through to see that. So I appreciate what you did, but it, you know, it didn't get at the issue that I'm really trying to get at. Was there discussion about these controversial issues and why they were controversial? And the decision was made, well, it doesn't matter whether they're controversial or not, we're going ahead. Or was there, you know, was it one of, okay, we put all these ideas out there, we brainstormed them, we're not going to criticize any of them or critique them, we're just going to move forward with them?
I'm happy to weigh in on that. And Jerry and Elvin and Carol were both a part of that process. And I'm happy to weigh in. And I do want to say, Carol, you know, this is the nature of this work. So you're not wasting our time. You're not wasting my time. I think this is an important conversation. Councilman Gregory and myself, who co-chaired the special commission, made it very clear to the commissioners that everything is on the table, that we were not going to sanitize their language. We weren't going to hamper any kind of ideas that they had. And we knew some of the items coming out were going to be controversial. We made that very clear early on, myself, you know, early on. Now, what that did was it did put our commissioners kind of in a place where they had asked several times, you know, anything's on the table. And I said, well, anything is on the table because these are just recommendations. And that's the point that many of us have made, that these are just mere recommendations. None of this is law. Which goes back to my point, as the political process started to ramp up, and the vitriol started to occur. My contention always was that these are just mere recommendations. I'm not really sure why folks are getting upset at a recommendation. We live in America. We have freedom of speech, and this is essentially someone's exercise to freedom of speech. Carol and Jerry and Elvin can weigh in, but I just want to make sure you're aware. We were very clear. They did a great job. That it was, any idea was on the table. So, you know, Carol and Elvin and Jerry, I think, Jerry, you've got your hands up, and then I'll go to Carol.
And Mr. Co-Chair, I was just going to add, if it would be helpful, the clerk's office can pull the minutes from some of our city council meetings and from the commission meetings that you had. If that would be helpful for the commissioners to have just as some background.
That would be awesome. And then Carol, just to let you know, yeah, every meeting that we had as the large commission was televised, and it's available, you know, for review. Jerry, and then Carol.
Yeah. So yeah, Carol, absolutely. All of the meetings of the special commission are archived, and if you actually go to the HARC website, there's a link back to the special commission website and those meetings. If you looked at the August 4th, which was the last meeting of the special commission, where Councilman Appel identified what he thought might be controversial issues, there was a discussion and a debate, and the vote was unanimous by the commission, the special commission, to move the report forward. All of the members of the commission said move the report forward. There was all along in our conversations and discussions, each of the subcommittees met separately. There were only a couple of occasions where we shared with each other at the general meeting very briefly what was in our reports. But it was clear, and I chaired the Criminal Justice Subcommittee, it was clear to us that our charge was to identify actions that we thought were potentially would have an impact on the direction that was given. And again, I comment that the vote of the commission was unanimous. And in fact, there were 6 members of the city council on the commission, plus the mayor. So in essence, when the report was rejected at the August meeting, the acceptance of the report was rejected. I'll remind you that the ordinance, which was the recommendation of the commission that we move forward, was approved on first reading, but was defeated on second reading, which then required the reintroduction of an ordinance that eventually got adopted in February of 2022 to create HARC rather than a standing commission on equity, inclusion, and racial conciliation.
Thanks, Jared. I think Elvin, you're up, and then Carol.
Oh, my apologies. I'm at 6-year-old cheer practice. But just real quick, so Carol, just as you're going back and watching those videos of the special commission meetings, just keep in mind that there are various subcommittees that met frequently as well. And so if you can get access to some of those meetings and meeting minutes and videos, just to kind of understand how we got to that point, that would be helpful too. And also, I made a comment at that last commission meeting that I think whenever you do go back and watch that video, please be sure to pay attention to my comment that I made in response to Councilmember Appel's statement. So I just wanted to put that in there for you guys. So yeah.
Thank you, Elvin. And Carol?
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot more to add at this point, but I'd be happy again, Carol, as a retired person to, sort of give you a different look, or as you want to look at some of the older meetings. I do feel like the subcommittees tell the story on how the recommendations were brought forward. And Jason is absolutely right. No one in authority told the subcommittees that they should do any less than make it their best work for the ideas that they were, first of all, researching in comparison to the disparities report, which was the foundation of their analysis. We were supposed to be providing recommendations that would give the city the opportunity to basically improve the conditions that the disparities had captured over 15 years of Charleston County society. So I think that we were not naive, I guess, as a commission when we took that vote on August 4th last year, knowing that there would be opposition on a level that is pretty familiar to a lot of people having lived in Charleston. I'm still essentially new, but it's not unfamiliar to me in trying to work here since the early 80s. So I do feel like, that is the history. We knew that we were pushing an uphill set of equations from the very beginning. And I think everybody on the commission felt, maybe sad on some level, but certainly not innocent about what we knew that was going to be, out in public after that.
Thanks, Carol. And then Carol, do you have any more comments?
No, I think, I may take either Carol or someone up and, have some other discussions, but that helps, to understand that, you were playing by a set of guidelines that, said, we're brainstorming and we want all the good ideas up here. And, that's what happened. And so, but, as you said there, I want to be upfront. I'm one of the ones who have some concerns about the things that were on there. You know, I do, and you know, I think we saw, you know, a lot of people do, and you know, it's. But I also am a proponent that, you know, we have to move forward in unity, and that is what is going to help us get to where we need to be. That we move together in unity and not in division. And you know, that's what I advocate doing, and you know, I feel good about, you know, what we're doing so far, and looking forward to continuing the work.
Thank you, Carol. Alvin, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm trying to do multiple things at once. I completely agree with Carol's statements. However, we do have to understand that this work isn't popular and change never comes easily. So if we're out here trying to appease everybody, trying to make a change and bridge some of these gaps, then we're probably going to continue just to be, you know, jacked up on our cinder blocks, spinning our wheels. So we just have to be cognizant of that going forward, that the work that we're doing is not popular and it's not going to be easy. So just please keep that in mind as a group, collectively. We will not be the most popular people in the city of Charleston. And I'm okay with that. And I hope everybody else on this call is okay with that too.
Thanks, Alvin. And good luck to your daughter. It sounds like she's having a great time. Before we transition to the story mapping presentation by Chloe, who I just want to say thanks for being here. I think it's going to be tremendously helpful, and it's going to help us kind of as a group kind of level set where we are. I think you'll see some powerful things. The two things I do want to mention is going back to Carol's point, not Carol Jackson, but Carol. One, you know, as that last meeting we had, where it was a unanimous vote, certainly I was aware, Councilman Gregory was aware that some of the recommendations were going to be controversial. But we didn't hear some of those concerns until the very end. And that was a bit of a surprise to me, but I had to realize that some of the concerns weren't being voiced by someone's personal opinions. They were being voiced by the political winds and what was political expedient. So and those things, and I will say, I've had this conversation with Councilman Appel, I think it inflamed some of the challenges that we had, but they were out there. So it's not like we were ignoring it. We knew that was going to happen. And the last thing I want to say is to those commissioners that are on this call that were within that process, this city owes them a debt of gratitude for the volunteer hours and the work that they put together. And this goes for every commission, any volunteer commission. We don't realize the amount of work that goes into it. The report that they put together took hours. So the YouTube videos that you're going to see, Carol, were just our commission meetings like this. There were several that met every other week. The subcommittees meeting that weren't available. They're probably not going to be available on YouTube, but hours and hours and hours of countless hours. So if you put yourself in my shoes and some of the commission members' shoes, when we heard the vitriol regarding 3 or 4 of those recommendations and completely disregarding the other 122, it really left a bad taste in our mouth that, you know, we get that there's the controversy on some of this stuff, but there's an overwhelming majority and body of work that was very helpful, and I think it's going to move our city in a positive way. So I just wanted to, before we transition, share that with you all. Story mapping presentation. Chloe, you are up.
Thank you all for inviting me. Just to check on time, the agenda originally said 30 minutes. Should I still plan for 30 minutes or should I try and tighten it up?
Well, normally these meetings are 90 minutes, right, Jennifer, scheduled? We've been going short. So I do feel like this is an important topic and I'd like you to take the 30 minutes if you could.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
So I'll be presenting today is of racial equity in the city of Charleston, South Carolina. Is the title of the story map, and story map is just a word for basically an interactive web page that includes mapping tools. So before I bring that page up, I did want to give a little bit of background and context as to how this tool came about and why. The city of Charleston is a member of the Government Alliance on Racial Equity, or GARE. If you want to learn more about that, the website is racialequityalliance.org. We are with 400 other jurisdictions that are members of that network. It's a peer-to-peer network that brings together racial equity directors and leads and to exchange information, collaborate on how to advance racial equity in their cities and to develop solutions to racial equity challenges. To become a member, you have to demonstrate that that jurisdiction is already taking steps to advance racial equity across all functions of the city and also depth, so from executive elected leadership to frontline staff. It shares a lot of tools. There's access to tools, resources, forums. This tool, the story map that I will be presenting to you all tonight, came from this network. The city of Asheville has a similar tool that inspired us to make our own. And this was a collaborative project between the then called Office of Equity, Inclusion, and Racial Conciliation and the Planning Department. And we had considerable support from our GIS staff as well. So this was a team of folks. Amber Johnson and I co-led this project. And this is something that's sort of ongoing and development. And I'm hoping that in the discussion afterward, if you all have any feedback or suggestions for how we can improve this tool or add to it or build on it, other tools you'd like to see, really encourage and welcome any feedback you have. So we created this, it took about a year, end of 2020 into 2021, and we first launched it on March 4th this year for Open Data Day. And it is primarily an educational tool. So both internally, we've used it and externally. The idea is that we're raising awareness about the city's commitment to racial equity. What is racial equity? The history of race in the city of Charleston, to spark discussion and to inform future decisions and actions. It's also acknowledging past harms and making that direct link to past decisions and actions to the inequities that we're facing today in the city. And it also showcases tools that we have currently available to how we can operationalize racial equity in our city processes and decisions and how we can assess progress that we're making toward these goals. We've presented at Open Data Day to City Council, the core team that Adrian mentioned earlier, Esri, which is a GIS, a geospatial, the sort of main mapping software out there. They reached out to us. They have a racial equity team to learn more about the tool. The White House Office of Science and Technology Policy has reached out to the city about this. College of Charleston have spoken to College of Charleston undergraduate class on environmental justice on the tool. And we've received requests for presentations from the Center for Creative Retirement and just today from MUSC. So it's already in action as an educational tool, and so it's serving its purpose, and I anticipate that there will be more opportunities and presentations like those. Share my screen. Okay, everybody see. Great. All right, so the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to basically just give you all a tour of the tool. I'm not going to read through everything. The idea is that this is something that you would go through and spend time with on your own independently. So I'll hit some highlights and then I'll show you how it works or the options that you have in terms of the interaction. And please feel free to interrupt me at any point if you have questions or want me to go back to something. The beginning as an introduction to racial equity itself. So defining equity and racial equity. I'm not going to read through this. And a lot of this is taken from the report that was produced by the previous commission. It goes through some key definitions, and these are also in the same report. So the same definitions from that report. And then it takes the reader through a brief history of Charleston and race. basically providing an arc of how we got to where we are today. In this timeline, there's an emphasis on government-sponsored harms against Black communities and focuses on how racism is literally etched into our city's landscape. Starts with a land acknowledgement to the indigenous tribes that were here before colonists arrived. Then it jumps, fast forwards to slavery. And post-slavery, during Reconstruction, how freed people settled throughout the Low Country. I'm going to zoom in here. So this is one of the functions. Each of these images, you can zoom in to learn more. This is a map from the city plan, Charleston City Plan, and it's showcasing the historic African-American settlement communities throughout the city of Charleston. We recognized 56 at the time. We've since learned of more. So this is just a start to understanding the vastness of the Black community in the city of Charleston. Just something to note throughout this as you read through it, the language and tone of this is explicitly direct, not trying to soften the story, because the story of race in Charleston is difficult and uncomfortable and painful. So just be mindful of that as when you take the time to read through this. Actually, back up here a little bit. So what this first part here kind of takes you through is this land was stewarded by indigenous tribes. Then colonists came. Then the slave trade led to a situation where the population was 3-to-1, sort of African Americans outnumbered white Charlestonians by 3-to-1 for generations. This map shows you the prevalence of Black communities in the city of Charleston. The history of Charleston is not as a white city until recently, at least in terms of population numbers. It's predominantly non-white for most of the history that we typically focus on. But that was not without attempts to change that. In 1931, the City of Charleston Planning and Zoning Commission contracted with a firm in New England called Morris & Knowles to essentially provide us with our first comprehensive plan. It wasn't called that. Comprehensive plans weren't common as they are today. They weren't mandated by the state then. And it provided the blueprints for our first zoning ordinance. I'm going to zoom into some text from the report. And this is all accessible. I believe we've digitized this all now and is in the Low Country Digital Library. Our records management office has helped with that. And this essentially is saying that there's a trend for a decline in the Black population in certain areas of the city. And at this time, keep in mind, the city was confined to the peninsula. And that the city should encourage that trend. And they can encourage that trend through providing proper facilities such as schools, parks, and playgrounds in logical locations. There were maps that reflected recommendations for white and Black residential districts. So we're working now on getting all of the maps associated with this report digitized and actually recreating the maps in layers that we can run analysis with and understand how this actually became embedded, how much of it became embedded in our zoning ordinance, and to see if any of the same tools applied then to further segregation are still in use today. Then, so that's at the local level, and then it references the Federal Housing Administration, the Federal Highway Authority through the period of urban renewal, where homeownership for white Americans was subsidized, where that same advantage was not granted to Black and other non-white citizens through the practice of redlining. Today, those same communities that were redlined have 52% less in equity. Their public schools typically are underfunded. They're hotter, less access to healthy food, more exposure to pollution, higher instances of chronic health conditions, and 3.6 years lower life expectancy. So those decisions then, even though they were in the past, the legacy is still very alive and having effects today. This is a map that we actually created to looking at historic imagery with the overlay of I-26 pathway going over existing communities. This particular shot is of Garden Hill on the upper, in the neck area by where Joseph Floyd Manor is. And the practice of urban renewal through housing initiatives and through highway initiatives destroyed about 2,000 communities across the country. And we have several examples of such projects in Charleston. We created a sort of a parallel tool, another story map, because that warranted a whole nother exploration into those examples in Charleston. Currently, we're working on getting, let me scroll back up to the top here. We're working on restoring the historical imagery. The source that we were pulling from is no longer working. So we're working on fixing that. So you're not getting the full effect if you do look through this tool right now. But this walks you through the projects. And when it's working, on the left, you would see the historic imagery from the pre-I-26, pre-infrastructure projects. And then on the right-hand side is modern day. So that you're not getting the effect now, but that's what you can access throughout this tool. So I'm not going to go through this now, but just wanted to point out that this tool is also available and I highly recommend it. So fast forward, all of these efforts, government-sponsored actions and decisions, investments, denial of investments, led to the literal destruction and impoverishment of Black communities. And today, in the city of Charleston, what we're seeing is a rapid decline of our Black population. So in just the last 10 years, by the US Census count, Black population in the city of Charleston fell by nearly 5,000. And there is strong evidence that we can tie this as a legacy to those actions in the past. So this is why the term racial conciliation, I think, is an important nuance and not reconciliation. It's not restoring a connection, it's creating a new connection between the city and Black Indigenous communities in particular. So the individuals who lived through urban renewal and these harms are still alive and active in their communities today. So these wounds are fresh. And that's something really important for anyone in the city to keep in mind when we're engaging with communities. So I'm going to do and this is, we recognize this is only part of the story. So we focus on a particular timeline here, highlighted particular events and experiences, but there's a more complete timeline that Amber constructed that you can access here. And it's also interactive, map-based, and kind of as you scroll through, it jumps around to the different places on the map, representing important moments in history. I'm going to do so the next piece is a deep dive into the data to show the effects of this legacy, in particular in how it's playing out as gentrification and displacement. These are some figures from the city plan showing change in population, so change in population by race, breaks it down by area, You can zoom in to each of these if you want to see them up close. So you can see this significant decline on the peninsula, Johns Island, and West Ashley of Black residents. Also in Johns Island, you're seeing other, which because of the data that we have available, it's not a great way to refer to humans, but that's got a large percentage of that would be Hispanic, non-white. This is showing the disparities in income by race, which are getting worse. So the gap, the income gap is increasing. And we also did an analysis on cost burden households across the city, and neighborhoods with a majority of Black residents were more than twice as likely to be housing cost burdened as those with a majority of white residents. And this takes some of that data above and breaks it down even further into a variety, to a series of interactive maps. So this is just showing general population change, not by race. It's just where we're growing and where we're losing people. You just keep scrolling to change maps. And then this is showing change in Black population by neighborhood, so at the neighborhood scale. With this tool, you can use these to zoom in and out. You can, I believe, yes, you can click on a neighborhood to see the statistics. This is showing the same thing, but Hispanic population. I'm zooming out so you can, this is a more interesting place to see it. So yellow is a decrease, blue is an increase. This is taking our census block data to show the change in time. So this is another slider tool, so you can look sort of into the past. So this is 2010 Peninsula, 2020. And this is a map of neighborhood change, which is a neutral term essentially to refer to what many know as gentrification. So neighborhood change is looking at income, education, percent white, cost of rent, and household size. These are all indicators that much academic research has contributed as indicators for gentrification. So we use this methodology that LA used for their, they call it their indices of neighborhood change. So we use the same methodology. Dark purple is high change. White or light blue is no change. And again, you can, I believe, click on a neighborhood and it'll show you the scores for each of those metrics. Then this is tying the neighborhood change map on the right, which you just saw, to change in the number of rent burdens households. The purpose of this tool here is to show you the direct link between the cost of housing and displacement. So I'm going to zoom in to illustrate this point. So if you were to just look at this, you'd say, oh, the east side and portions of the west side have seen a decrease in rent burdened households. That's good, right? Fewer people are cost burdened in these neighborhoods. But then when you lost my slider tool. Where's my arrow? When you look at the neighborhood change, these are areas of high change. And so what we're actually seeing is the number of households that are rent burdened have decreased, not because those households are earning a higher income or because housing prices are going down, because the data that we have proves otherwise. So what we're actually seeing is those lower income households have left and higher income earning households have moved in. So I'm the rest of this. So this is in summary, the problems that we're dealing today are tied to a past that was intentional, whether they're intentional or not today. And so we're going to have to break the cycle that was started long ago. And we have some resources here showing how we're incorporating this type of data into other issues, other work of the city to understand how race is sort of racial disparities, looking at them in terms of street tree canopy, how we, looking at flooding and resiliency, public safety. So understanding how race is showing up in all these various functions of the government and making sure that we are taking that into account. Because if we don't disrupt every day that we don't disrupt the status quo, we're just continuing to perpetuate that legacy that we've inherited. And to quote Mayor Carter, St. Paul, Minnesota, he said at a recent convening I went to, we can't just do a lot of different things. We have to do things differently. We have to acknowledge the harm, and then we need to rewrite the rules. So these are tools that can help us understand what that harm is and how we can change things going forward. So the rest of this is information about open data, the city's commitment to open data, other ways that we're committed to racial equity, what we're doing, and then a call to action. And I'm happy to bring back up any parts of that if folks want to ask any questions.
Can we just make sure we get the link from you, Chloe, or
oh yes, great.
Yeah.
Yes, great point. So
Yeah.
The short link for it is
in an email tomorrow. That'd be easier than trying to capture it right here.
Yeah, and I'm I actually have an old slide from a previous presentation that has that. So I may just bring that up real quick so that everybody can see it, anybody watching this. So here's the link.
Thank you, Chloe.
Yeah.
And then I think as a follow-up, Adrian, when we communicate with our commissioners, we can just include this link in any follow-up communication. Any questions for Chloe? Thank you again for all, not just the work today, but working with Amber on this, and particularly with our GIS department. I know it was a lot heavy lift to tell this story, but any questions for Chloe? Well, thank you, Chloe. A couple things before we depart. We've got about 14 minutes. Jerry, go ahead.
Yeah, Chloe, you mentioned the GAR relationship. How have we been maintaining that? What other tools may they be a resource, for example, for us in terms of thinking through our workshop, our upcoming workshop?
Probably. I haven't scoured the entire thing. Their library of resources is quite extensive. But what the membership provides us with is any city staff person can sign up, sort of enroll to have access to their library. And there's webinars in there. And so, Adrian's just onboarded, so I don't know that she's had time to pour through it either, but I'm sure that there are resources that would be helpful for this group.
And thank you. And my second question, have you been looking at other city departments' data to add to the story map? And if so, what's your priority? Because that might help us also as we begin to look at the recommendations from the special commission report with the departments that have data that might help inform us to create metrics.
So the way that I see that sort of how we can grow this is as an educational tool, we wouldn't want to add too much more length to it. But in that end portion where we're showcasing the various tools that different departments are using or different projects are using, we can certainly add to that sort of slideshow there and direct people to those. We also have an open data portal set up that's that has an equity category, so that people can go to the racial equity category under our open data portal and access a whole library of tools and resources and data and things like that. So what we're between the office, the HARC office and our innovation office and our GIS, we're working together to support more teams and departments to create tools. So if you have ideas for, you're like, we would really like to understand what the disparities are in this area, or we would like a tool that allows us to do this and to see this to help us understand what the issue is and inform recommendations that we put forward to City Council. Please, let Adrian know, and we have a tremendous GIS team and data team, a lot of data nerds at the city, and we can, I'm sure we could pull something together.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jerry. And Carol, you're up.
Yeah, just to carry that forward, one place, you said that MUSC is now a new user, or they've connected in with this whole open data. Is that correct? You mentioned MUSC is.
So they've requested one of the departments has requested a presentation to their staff.
Oh, okay.
As sort of continuing education.
I mean, it seems like we don't have a department for it other than our own, nurse under the HR realm of assisting employees. But it seems like public health, public welfare would be, health and welfare, I think, would be a missing avenue that we really, we 100% rely on expertise outside of the city for how the city can be more connected into those kinds of improvements. And so I guess that would be one that maybe we could mull over as a recommendations team, but it seems like that, and that would be a really cool way of involving other stakeholders that, we obviously have developed close relationships with as a city. So the College of Charleston and MUSC for a variety of, missions. So anyway, that would just off the top of my head that occurred.
Jerry, you're up. And
yeah, I'm sorry. One other thing, Chloe. I know the city's beginning to go through the budget process. Is there any requests in the either GIS or planning for resources that might enhance this tool?
I don't think so, not directly that I can think of off the top of my head. But I will admit I was not prepared for that question, so I don't.
Thanks, Jerry, for that. Stephen?
Thanks. And data nerds being the technical term, right, Chloe? No,
self-identified. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Well, in all seriousness, thank you so much. This is really an awesome thing for a map nerd like me to help me understand. If I see something in numbers, frankly, it doesn't make a ton of sense just intuitively to my brain, but maps do. So for people who, learn slightly differently than seeing a bunch of numbers in a chart like we just went through in redistricting, I think this is really helpful to understand the story of the city. But, Jerry, you were at the meeting the other night. You watched that whole conversation about painful conversation at some points about redistricting. And that's sort of the nail in the coffin to that presentation, to use a very bad metaphor. It is just so stark, how serious, all the problems that we are going to talk about on this commission, from mainly affordability, really, is really the thing that I think like to see come out of this commission, is something to make this city more livable, for the folks that we are clearly driving out. And if you haven't had a chance to look at our redistricting conversations, I can't recommend starting there strongly enough, because we have tried mightily to stick by the standards that we would have in 2010, when the Justice Department would have stepped in and told us to do certain things, in terms of our electoral districts. And we just can't, because the numbers aren't there. The African-American population doesn't live in the same communities that those maps showed even a few years ago. And it comes down to, in my brain, choices that we have made intentionally, in some instances, unintentionally in others, that have affected affordability. And that's sort of the new frontier in this conversation, I think. And that's where my brain went to while Chloe was speaking. So again, thank you so much. I think that was really helpful, to drive home the point, at least in my mind.
Thanks, Stephen. 6 minutes left. Any last comments? So Chloe, that tremendously helpful. And I think for me, being on the commission, starting with a special commission in 2020, what was eye-opening for me is someone that's not from Charleston, someone that is obviously not African-American, was that, in my mind, growing up in the North, we heard about slavery, we heard about the injustices, and it was always this paradigm of, that was like 200 years ago, or 300 years ago. Certainly things have improved. We've just elected an African-American president. Racism doesn't exist. I heard that, I felt that, to be honest, I felt that. I represent Ashleyville, Maryville, West Ashley, and that's one of our most historic African-American communities here in Charleston. And I'm sharing this story because it really illustrates to me that the issues we have are not from 200 years ago. Ashleyville and Maryville was a burgeoning economic powerhouse in our area. They had their own banks, they had their own commerce, they had their own grocery stores, they had their own dentists and doctors. For all intents and purposes, it was one of the most successful communities in South Carolina. 1936, the state interjected itself and took its charter away, which essentially disbanded the community. So fast forward a few years, many of the folks that were living in Ashleyville, Maryville were fighting in World War II, came back on the GI Bill, thought that they would be able to purchase a little parcel of land in their neighborhood. Well, in fact, the banks told them that ain't happening. And we had the redlining. So that's one generation ago. I see people on this call, and I'm not calling out people's ages, but that was less than 70 some years ago. That's a lifetime. That is not 200 years ago. So it's easy for me to see the direct correlation of decisions that were intentionally made in the 1940s and 50s that prevented those communities from building generational wealth to where we are today, and not just not having the generational wealth in a home, but when you fast forward and extrapolate out, we have some of the worst public schools in some of these communities, some of the worst food deserts that we have in these communities, and the list goes on. So for me, this work has always never been about pitting one race against another race. A healthy boat is going to raise us all up. I'm not sure what the saying is. I can't remember what it is. My point is, someone made, what is it, Carol?
Rising tide lifts all boats.
Someone made it mention that it's becoming unlivable for all folks downtown to afford downtown. But I think it's important for us to remember that it disproportionately affects our African-American community. And that for me, that's been a resonating message around this work, that this is not just about race. This is about making sure all of us in Charleston can get to a place where we have an affordable place to live, but also acknowledging that, you know, we all don't start on first base. Some of us start on third base. So for me, that's been important. I want to conclude with that. I know, Bonnie, you had your hand up.
Yes. I am anxious to get started. And so I'm just wondering what our immediate future looks like, and when we will get started on the real work.
I love that. And I love that question. So we got to come back with the rules. I think today was an attempt to kind of give us a little bit of history. I did hear from previous meetings, particular, I think it was Mr. Simmons, maybe it was Matt, Bob, or Carol, I can't remember, but wanted to make sure that they had a full understanding of the work. So I think our workshop will help with that. But to answer your question, Bonnie, I am ready to get that workshop group together, start looking at through the recommendations. I just wanted to be cognizant and respectful of the fact that some folks aren't aware of everything that's been going on, and we're going to disagree on some things, but I want to make sure that they're comfortable with us proceeding, because I think, to Carol's question earlier, Carol Jackson, you know, we didn't take this opportunity with the special commission, and we kind of just rushed into things. And I think we assumed some folks were aware of definitions of words or aware of the history, and we didn't take time to take inventory. So we are now, this is our fourth meeting. We're heading into our fifth meeting. I'm hoping that as we come into our fifth meeting, that we can get to work and start talking about the workshop, work group, and looking at the recommendations. But that's going to be the pleasure of this commission. As co-chair, and I know Jerry agrees with me, I want to roll up our sleeves and get to work, but I want to make sure that you all are comfortable in proceeding with the information that you have. Carol?
May I say one last thing? I know we're against time. This is Sharon Milligan.
Hey, Sharon.
One of the things I would employ this group to do is to have a better understanding of the corporations and the businesses that are fiercely committed to making a difference and not totally sure how, and bring that to the forefront, because I think it makes everyone feel better when they recognize that there's a whole unified group that understand we need to make some changes. For example, banks are now lending with zero down to disadvantaged groups to give them the whole sense of home ownership, that pride and sense of responsibility and duty and being a part of that dream. There are so many businesses that are offering things. I don't know what they all are, but I do know that there is a movement in this country to make a difference. And if we could understand what's already being done and give that to people, make it known so that people are starting to feel better instead of feeling worse. People are at their best when they feel good. People are at their best when they feel supported, when they feel that others are doing something on their behalf simply because it's the right thing to do. And I think there are things out there, I don't know what they all are, but I feel like this group could be the voice in leading forth some of the very, very positive things that are happening and the changes that are being enacted. I don't know necessarily how we do it, but I feel like that's our responsibility.
Thank you, Sharon. I will say, I'm not going to put Elvin on the spot, but Elvin was a chair for our Economic Empowerment Subcommittee, and they spent countless hours on answering some of those questions. So I would implore you all to, if you haven't, look at some of those recommendations. That the roadmap is there. I'm certainly not saying all the solutions that are there, but the roadmap is there, and a lot of that work has already been done to a certain degree. We just got to connect the dots. So thank you for that comment, Sharon. Carol or anyone else? And if you had your hand up, Carol.
Yeah, I did. Thank you. Are we in open discussion now, I assume? So
open discussion, but we're at 6:36.
I know. So I want to bring, I think it would be very helpful for beginning next meeting if we could add a standing agenda item called case studies, or, you know, examples, however you want to say it, of the things that are going on in our city that would be directly connected to some of our recommendations. And then that would be, we could each bring forward, an example, not to have the whole meeting like that, but I know of two things that were introduced to the city council during public comment period this past Tuesday that are prime examples of the things that we were meeting about all through the special commission and making recommendations. And a lot of people learn by numbers, a lot of people learn by visual, a lot of people learn by stories. And I think as much as we can identify exactly what is happening in our city on a small scale, but a case study type framework, that could help people really say, like you have, Jason, yes, we're not talking about the past, we're talking about the present and the future. And it really is more compelling when people have something to focus on that they can sink their teeth in. So I hope that we can do that in the future.
Thank you, Carol. We'll add that to the agenda moving forward. So as we formulate the agenda and think about that, Adrian, definitely want to dig into the recommendations in that work group. I think Carol's spot on with some sort of relevant examples, and I think it helps. Other than that, Jerry, any thoughts?
Yeah, a couple things, Jason. One, I want to have folks feel comfortable to reach out, to Adrian, give Jason or I a call or email us in terms of items that you'd like to see on the agenda. All right. And or information that you think you might need to be helpful. I don't know whether or not Adrian mentioned the City Division of Culture will be sending invitations to members of the commission to participate in the activities of the Moshe Festival, which is a cultural festival focused around African American and Caribbean experience. And it's, again, an opportunity for folks to experience something they haven't. It's a city-sponsored event. It begins, I believe, September 29th. It runs through October 9th. So check your email for that. And I would expect that in the future, we'll be receiving those kind of invitations as commissioners. So it give us another opportunity to be engaged and involved in things. Today, the mayor there was an announcement in the mayor's office of Hispanic Heritage Month activities. 11 o'clock, there's a calendar that runs from the 15th of this month to the 15th of next month of activities. That's the kind of information that we'll be sharing with each other. And the last comment is there's a group from Greenville who have a similar charge to ours who'll be visiting Charleston next week. And we've been invited to be listening on a panel in terms of what they're doing and to share with them a little bit of what's happening in Charleston. I believe that's next, I forgot what day it is. I think perhaps the 20th in the middle of the day. I will
You'll
not
send it. You're going to send it.
Well, I don't know I'll check on it whether or not we can come if it's an open event or not. I think they're doing a luncheon, for the group, but I'll check on that. But again, it's an example when we're talking, when Mike was talking about having the opportunity to speak about what we're doing, but not speaking for. This is an example of an opportunity for us to learn and be exposed. So whenever that information is available, we'll make sure we get it to Adrian, and hopefully she'll be able to communicate with us to keep us abreast of things that we might want to be involved and engaged in.
Thank you, Co-Chair Jerry. It is now 6:37. One last piece. As we talk about some of the resources and information, Adrian, you and I can meet the idea of having some sort of monthly newsletter to the public that could be linked. Chloe, correct me if I'm wrong. What is the weekly?
Hey, neighbor.
Charleston.
Hey, neighbor.
Yeah, hey neighbor, we should be able to link to that, when we send our stuff out, and there should be a link embedded within that. We could talk more. I just think we need to get into common practice of getting some of this information out to the public. With that, is there anything else to come before this evening's commission? May I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right, with that motion to, and the second, can I get a second on that?
Second.
Second.
All right, this meeting is